Hello and welcome again in the channel. So what you are looking at right now on the screen is a pumping heart. Can you guess today's topic? What we are going to deal with today? Yes, definitely. It is related with heart. And the text is The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. Very renowned short story, critical, psychological, and indeed worth reading. This short text can give you so much information about so much psychological pressure, paranoia, and the other aspects that are related with human psyche. You cannot believe it. The text is going to be a very big deal in your syllabus as well as to understand the human psyche and also to understand who is Edgar Allan Poe. So, again, without wasting time, let us move on to the text analysis. We are going to deal with here so many things because there are too many slides and I need to explain all of them and you have to understand all of them. So, stay tuned with the video till the end and we are going to explore something new. So, first, let us come to the historical context. And in a historical context, we all know that the text is published in 1843 in the Pioneer. And now we have to understand which literary movement Poe was associated with. On the one hand, you have the Romanticism, on the other hand, you have American Gothic. Romanticism and American Gothic both are bigger literary movements, so you need to understand it very carefully, particularly with which Poe was associated or with both Poe was associated with at all. Now, a historical context also suggests that what is American Gothic literature, because we know a little more about Romanticism. American Gothic literature, there are four parts that I have divided into themes, cultural context, violence and horror, and character traits. So, in all of these traits, you have to understand that irrationality, madness, guilt, superhuman power are themes of American Gothic literature. On the other hand, that poverty, slavery, racial politics, American frontier, etc., are the cultural context. And again, melancholy, insanity, obsession are the characteristic traits of American Gothic literature. And finally, violence and horror, graphic violence, disturbing scenarios, etc., are being presented in this kind of literature. Now, there is, on the one hand, American Gothic, on the other hand, there is Romanticism. So, whereas American Gothic suggests the psychological depth, dark, airy themes. Romanticism suggests individual's power and nature's beauty. And now the comparison has been completed. So Poe was associated in both with the psychological depth and individual's power. That means the American Gothic literature as well as Romanticism. Both impacts are there on Poe. Now, there is a very short point-wise summary that I have given here about the short story, and all of them are important because there are 8 points from the introduction of the narrator to the confession part. And in each point, what you have to deal with. Now, before reading this short summary, I need to tell you something that before watching this video, you have to understand the story very carefully because the story is a very interesting one. Just go through the story and then come to the video part, then analysis will be fulfilled. You can understand. Even after that, if you do not have the time or you cannot manage the story completely, then there is the short summary, very short summary and point-wise summary. Each point you need to remember of the story, and each point from the introduction of the narrator to the obsession with the old man's eye, plan to kill the old man, murder of the old man, collecting the body, arrival of the police, the heartbeat. And now, what I need to tell you that we are going to deal with each of them, each factor in the story very meticulously because there are so many themes, there are so many aspects, so many symbolic aspects, imagery, rhetorics, etc., that we all need to understand. Again, without wasting time, let us move on to the next. So, literary analysis of the focus area of this text, if we are going to deal with it, here are few, like the character introduction, unique concepts, symbols, themes, allusions, use of literary devices. All of them we need to understand. And growing guilt, and finally, confession. Here, the character hierarchy in the narrative of the Telltale Heart. The text shows that narrator, old man, police, neighbor. In that way, the first comes the narrator, then the old man, then the police, then the neighbor. So the central voice of the story is the narrator. Key figure on the narrative is the old man. Authority figures in the story is the police, and community perspective comes from the neighbor. Now here, there is a short character traits or character sketches of each individual or each type, and you can understand from this that these are very significant parts. if the narrator comes into our point, that this narrator is never fully characterized, because Cohen never gives us the chance that he did not mention anything about his name or anything that is associated with the old man. The narrator gives us very comprehensive idea of the old man, his characteristic traits, and how he is behaving with the old man, etc. Narrator are close enough to the old man, and the daily routine of the narrator suggests that he is very much associated, closely associated with the old man. And also he is passionate, unbalanced, and finally he becomes a murderer. Don't worry, the character traits are not yet complete yet. This is just a short view, or rather shorter view of the characteristic traits of the characters. Here is the first one is the narrator. The second one is the old man. The old man is completely characterized here, and he is characterized intentionally. Why? Because he has an unnatural and filmy blue eye, like a vulture's. There is a reference the vulture's eye with the old man. The narrator himself says a lot of time. Now, the old man is a passive character and also rich and seems to have the authority. So, authoritative figure is here the old man, not that kind of authority figure like the police, but the authority comes from the inside. He is the master of the house. From this point of view, he is the authority. But he does little in the story besides sit in the bed, sleeping in the bed, etc. Now, finally comes the neighbor, that the neighbor who never actually appears in the story. Here's the old man shriek in the night, suspecting foul play. The neighbor contacts the police to lodge a report. And finally, the police are here. Three police officers come to investigate the report of the scream. The officers who appear in the final few paragraphs in the story are not differentiated and don't speak. So their relationship with the narrator is finally revealed, and because they are not investigating properly, they have not the proper clue. As part of that, it is the narrator finally who reveals his guilt, who confesses ultimately. So the police are the passive also factors for the narrator, because narrator does everything in the story. Again, I'm telling you, this is just a shorter view of all the characters. Don't judge these characters from the shorter view. Now, for your convenience, I have marked significant points in different colors here in narrator, old man, neighbor, and police. So you can understand these are the factors that are associated with each character. Now, moving on to the next slide, where is the unique concepts. There are a lot of unique concepts, and believe me, in these unique concepts, all of the characters are integrated. All of the characters are very much connected. So unique concepts are these. See here, unreliable narrator, so illusion of transparency, hypersensitivity, paranoid schizophrenia, ratiocination, and psychological mystery. These are the factors. As I told you, that this story is a very crucial and very complex one. Now, unique concepts like ratiocination, illusion of transparency, unreliable narrator, these factors are associated with the story, and we are going to deal with each one step by step. So here is the first one, that the unreliable narrator. Many of you perhaps know about this concept of unreliable narrator, but again, let us continue. The unreliable narrator, as Poe, keeps readers in a state of uncertainty because of this unreliable narrator. The narrator's distorted perceptions and mental inability to provide insight or deeper thoughts into his fractured psyche. And we cannot completely believe the narrator, whatever he is saying in the story or whatever he is doing in the story. And those factors are related to the narrator. Characters like the narrator are called unreliable narrator because their reliable versions are not present. Whatever they are saying may not be believed in the story. So the unreliable narrator or narration also enhances the suspense, as readers must infer the truth from the gaps and contradictions in his account. Maybe in the post-structuralism, this concept of unreliable narrator is very important, because from his gaps, you can create a newer story, a newer, broader version of the story. Here, the first point that comes is a contradictory statements. The narrator's description of his actions reveals his inconsistencies. He presents himself as the both careful and calculating. See here, careful to the master of the house and calculating, because after his murder, what he can do or how he can do, he is calculating in that way. His failure to maintain a coherent narrative constructions or demonstrations, his unreliability as it constantly shifts between calm, deliberate reasoning and uncontrollable fear, proves that he is not reliable at all. The second point that comes is paranoia and hallucination. In the story's climatic moments at the end, that narrator becomes convinced that he hears the old man's heart beating beneath the floorboards. Now, Here, text's phrase was louder, louder, louder. Now, this auditory hallucinations is a clear sign of his unreliability because maybe there was an absence, a complete absence of that kind of sound. So the reader realizes that he is being driven by guilt and paranoia, which distorts his perception of reality. The third point that comes as the insistence of sanity. So from the very beginning, the narrator aggressively insists on his sanity, that he is mad, that he is going paradoxically casts doubt on it. He says that, but this is the text express the line from the text. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. So he's overemphasizing on his insanity, on vision of a disease that he has, a disease on his unbalanced mind. So how can you believe such a person who is himself saying that he is unbalanced, he has a disease, he is insane, and he cannot keep records clearly? You cannot believe that kind of person. The last point is that illogical justification for the murder. So here his patent motive for murder is both bizarre and sufficient. Why? Because the reasoning seems irrational. He claims to have no personal animosity towards the old man, stating that I loved the old man, he had never wronged me. So instead, he insists that it is the old man's vulture eye that drives him to murder. So it is only the eye that gives him the enough reason to murder or to kill that old man. This fixation on the eye is illogical and obsessive, which further calls into question his reliability and hints at a deeper psychological areas. Finally, that the text co-creates an unreliable narrator whose distorted perceptions, justifications, and inconsistencies in the narration undermine his credibility, making it clear to the reader that he cannot be trusted. So, this is the concept of the unreliable narrator, and the narrator himself is very, very unreliable. Now, here I need to remember one thing just about this story. Four basic aspects that you need to remember. One is hearing, another is the eye, that is the old man's eye, vulture eye. Third is the heartbeat, the heartbeat of the old man. And finally, the confession. If you can remember these four parts, you can have everything about the text. Just remember these four parts, and these four parts are almost present in every point, every unique concepts, every question that you need to answer. Now, the final part, that is the confession. And here I have a question, that why actually the narrator confesses. I guess there are three unique concepts that are closely associated with it. That why does the narrator confess? First of all, is the illusion of transparency. Second is hypersensitivity. And third is paranoid schizophrenia. These are unique concepts as well as they are connected with each other. So when you need to understand the illusion of transparency, you can also understand that hypersensitivity and paranoid schizophrenia, how they are working in the text. Now, the first point is the illusion of transparency. Here, what is illusion of transparency? It is a psychological phenomena, remember, which people overestimate the extent to which their inner thoughts and emotions are visible to others. So, Poe here employs the concept to underscore the narrator's paranoia and guilt, particularly in the story's climatic moments. So, it is the overestimation, the extent to which their inner thoughts and emotions are visible to others. You think that your emotions are visible to others, your inner thoughts, almost to the people who are in front of you may get the notion that you can understand that they are getting you. The narrators believe that his guilt is obvious. Now, after committing the murder, the narrator initially feels confident about his cleverness in hiding the dead body under the floorboards. When the police arrive to investigate his belief that they can see through the facade of calmness, so he is very calm. Say, this is a facade. This is unique disguise that he's wearing. So the police cannot understand. Maximum thought may come that police cannot understand, but on the other hand, the narrator thinks that the police can understand and can guess his facade. So his calmness is going to begin to unravel. Though the officers appear oblivious, that he believes his guilt is apparent to them, and he describes his feelings as I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears. So here the narrator's anxiety makes him think that his inner turmoil is obvious, and even though the officers are unaware of his guilt. The next one is the beating of the heart, the old man's beating. Now, narrator's guilt intensifies his experiences the auditory hallucinations that I told you, the old man's heart beating beneath the floorboards. This sound, which no one can hear at least, becomes unbearable, and he believes the officers must hear it too. They heard, they suspected, they knew. This is the narrator's idea. This is the illusion of transparency, as if that my inner thoughts are coming outside. So the illusion of transparency here leads him to think the police are pretending not to notice, playing a cruel game to explore his guilt. He is believed that the sound is as audible to them as he is listening or he is hearing those sounds. So this is a misplaced confidence, that is inner guilt and panic are visible. The last point is the confession. Final illusion of transparency pushes him to confess. Driven to the edge of his conviction that the police can see his guilt, he exclaims, Villains, I admit the deed. I admit the deed. Tear up the planks here. Here, it is the beating of this hideous heart. His guilt has led him to believe that his inner feelings have become so transparent to the other people, to those who are in front of him. And they are fully aware of his crime. Ironically, they likely remained unaware until his outburst. So until he points out himself that I have committed the crime, I have committed the murder. So and this is the body here lying. Unless and until he does this, the police were clearly oblivion of that. Naturally, Poe's use of illusion of transparency, the narrator's inner conflict, and the corrosive effect of guilt. His belief that others can see or hear what he feels within demonstrates how guilt distorts his perception of reality. This is illusion of transparency. One's guilt, that means the narrator's guilt, is coming out even if he does not do anything. The next point is the hypersensitivity, which is a strange motive in the story. Now, what is the hypersensitivity? It is a trait of the narrator shaping both his heightened perceptions and his descent into madness. This is the hypersensitivity. It manifests as an extreme awareness of sounds, feelings, and small details, which drives the narrator to actions and thoughts that reveal his mental instability. As I have said, that four things that you need to remember to understand every concept of the text. See here, auditory hallucinations again here. Now, acute hearing. Narrator's hypersensitive hearing is evident. Early on when he says, I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth, I heard many things in hell, at the just the beginning of the story that he is describing about himself. So it is about his acute sense of hearing. Now, this extreme sensitivity, which he claims as a proof of his sanity, instead underscores his disturbed mind. His perception of sounds beyond normal human being or normal human capacity hints at paranoia and delusion rather than sanity. The old man's eye is the second point that you need to understand. The narrator's obsession with the old man's eye, specifically the vulture's eye, is another example of hypersensitivity. He describes it as pale blue eye with a film over it, and his extreme aversion to this specific detail drives his violent impulses. Though the old man has done him no harm, and his hypersensitivity to the eye, that means he's so much connected, he's so much overpowered, his thought was so much expressive about this. His extreme aversion to this specific detail drives his violent impulses. Now, again, whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. This is his saying, this is his idea. So, which might ignore or feel mildly disturbed by becomes an overwhelming, all consuming fixation to the narrator. So, this is the I which drives him mad. And this is the I which creates in him the hypersensitivity. So, hypersensitivity comes from that point of the old man's eye. Now, here's the beating heart. And what is beating heart? The clearest example of this hypersensitivity that he hears the beating of the heart of the old man coming under the floorboard. So it grew louder and louder and louder. So his acute perception, amplified by guilt and paranoia, turns an imagined sound into something unbearable to him. So this is the level of hypersensitivity that he has to confess to the police. The level of hypersensitivity struck him most or strikes him most that he cannot bear. The sound becomes unbearable, the eye becomes unbearable. And when these factors are happening, believe me, you are also going to be hypersensitive in each aspect. So, Poe's portrayal of hypersensitivity in the narrator serves as a vehicle for the theme of madness. So, it goes to the theme of madness, as you can understand. And not only this hypersensitivity, illusion of transparency also helps in his madness. Now, building a thematic idea. Narrator's heightened senses, which it thinks prove his sanity, actually illustrate his descent into irrationality, transforming ordinary perceptions into overwhelming, horrific experiences. This hypersensitivity blurs the line between reality and imagination. See here? Capturing the disturbing self destructing effects of his obsessive mind. So, this is the hypersensitive factor of the narrator. Next point is the story is also a study of paranoid schizophrenia. This is also connected somehow with the hypersensitivity and everything. The story is about the intense paranoia, auditory hallucinations, and distorted reality, which we have already discussed earlier. The story provides textual clues that suggest the narrator's unstable mind and paranoid delusions, creating a compelling psychological case study within the text. So, paranoia and fixation are the old man's eye. So, this is the first point where you need to understand about the paranoid schizophrenia part. It's a vulture eye, a pale blue eye with a film over it, which we have already discussed, which we have already mentioned and analyzed clearly. So this is again that paranoid schizophrenia comes overpowering to the old man. That the overpowering comes whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. The similar kind of expression that you have already received. This is the paranoia. This is the fixation on the old man's eye. And the fixation on the old man's eye gives him a eerie feeling. He becomes paranoid and becomes schizophrenic. Second point is that same auditory hallucinations, which also gives clear-cut idea of his paranoid schizophrenic moments, that a low, dull, quick sound such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. See that the description itself is very interesting and very psychological because through the description, even you can understand. Well, this is very strange. This is something paranoia. This is something schizophrenic moments that the narrator becomes gradually schizophrenic. The sound he insists grows louder and louder in his mind, driving to kill the old man. See, why hell is that possible for a person that even a sound can make him aggressive, that he can kill the old man, his master, whom he is serving for longer days. So this is the auditory hallucinations which creates the paranoid schizophrenia in the narrator's character. Paranoid schizophrenia is also suggestive in inability to distinguish reality from delusion because finally the narrator cannot differentiate between the reality and his own paranoid delusions. No, this is the manifestation in his insistence that the old man's heartbeat is real. So it is not real, but because of his paranoia, because of his schizophrenic ideas or moments, he thinks the heartbeat of the old man is real. He is convinced it continues to beat under the floorboards, driving him to confession. Actually, he confesses. And the last part is distorted thought and speech. The narrator's fragmented, repetitive language suggests disorganized thought patterns, a sign of schizophrenia. His disjointed sentences and frequent exclamations as true, nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous I had been, and create an intense, erratic tone, mirroring the disordered thinking associated with schizophrenia. So these factors are clearly associated with the paranoid schizophrenia. Last one is grandiose delusions and hyper-awareness. A sentence that you should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what station I went to work. This exaggerated sense of confidence and intelligence shows grandiosity, a symptom where individuals believe they have superior abilities or special insights. See here, sharpened senses. He has the sharpened senses. And now, whenever he is overemphasizing himself, he is actually becoming a schizophrenic patient, schizophrenic person, where he is giving himself too much exposure, too much thought about himself. He is thinking himself about a great person. So these are the factors, these are the examples, these are the clues that suggest the paranoid schizophrenia. So the text effectively illustrates the internal horror of paranoid schizophrenia through the narrator's descent into madness. Gradually, the narrator becomes the mad. The next point is ratiocination imposed the telltale heart. Ratiocination is a comparatively new term where the process of logical reasoning to reveal the narrator's careful planning and obsession with detail, ironically highlighting his madness. Here are a few key textual examples that I have suggested here. The first one is careful planning of the murder. Now, a narrator insists on his sanity at the earlier and calculated approach. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded with true caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I want to work. The same sentence that previously worked for another example, now here the same sentence works as the for another example, careful planning of the murder. Here, the narrator tries to convince the reader that he is sane by pointing out there's a foresight and caution. See, what person who is pointing out that I'm very much cautious about what I have done? Again, the same person, the same cautious idea, drives him to become a man. Very complex situation, very complex character, very unreliable character indeed. So, careful planning of the martyr is an example of ratiocination. Now, his hatred for the old man's vulture eye is here important. Second is nightly vigil. Each night for a week, the narrator enters the old man's room very slowly to avoid waking him, an act that he describes with pride in his precision and patience. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the openings so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. So, this is the narrator's deliberate pace, taking an hour to enter the room, underscore his methodical thinking. So, this nightly vigil also suggests that the part of hallucination, that the process of logical reasoning. And the next part is preparation for the murder and disposal of the body. The narrator gives a detailed account of how he disembowels and hides the old man's body. Here in this speech, in the textual example that I've collected from the text, here you can understand that the whole line is about how he has done to hide the body, the methodical planning, the methodical process that he follows. And the last one is the heightened sensitivity to sound. I grew louder and louder, the same sentence that I have taken from the text earlier too. But here the narrator is confronted by the police and hears the imaginary heartbeat going louder. His sense of control deteriorates. Now his raciocination begins to break down here as he fixates on the sound of the heart. His reasoning spirals into paranoia and delusion, interpreting the police officer's calm demeanor as a calculated trick to taunt him, as if the police is planning something very brilliantly. So he is doing something. The police are probably doing something to catch him. His thought works within him. His ratiocination perhaps fails here. His calculative mind comes into in the form of paranoia, comes into the form of schizophrenic moments, and also as madness. He is deliberately going into the madness. In these examples, ratiocination serves as a double-edged sword, illustrating how even precise logical thinking can lead to madness when driven by obsession. So, one hand, there is obsession. On the other hand, the narrator is trying to do something which should not be done because he is overemphasizing himself. Now, that is very critical. Next part is the post-skeletal heart is a psychological mystery. Now here, blending elements of horror with an intense exploration of the narrator's disturbed mind. So narrator has a disturbed mind, and also there is a horror arc connected with the narrator's disturbed mind. The first point is the mystery of motivation, obsession versus rationalization. Again, in this textual example, what you need to get is that the narrator's fixation on the old man's eye drives him mad, as we have already understood this. So, this is the mystery of motivation. The paradox that he loves the old man, simultaneously he wants to kill the old man. This is the paradox. The paradox actually raises questions, the questions that remain unsettling, and his obsession with the eye hints at underlying psychological issues. Now, his attempt to rationalize time while behaving irrationally adds to the mystery. Now, he wants to rationalize everything, but his behavior becomes irrational. Now, this is irrational, this is mysterious. So, this begins the mystery, this creates the mystery. The textual example also says that it took me an hour to place my whole head within the etc. The sentence indeed suggests that he has the idea, the narrator's patience, the idea of his patience and methodical approach, which highlights his inner conflict. His need for control over the I clashes with his irrational fears. So, creating a psychological puzzle within. So, this creates a psychological mystery. This makes the text psychologically very mysterious. Next is the unreliable narrator and questionable sanity. At this point, we have already proved earlier that there is no point that he creates so many aspects, he told so many things, so many sentences which are not connected, interconnected with each other, which have no logical reasoning, logical meaning. So, unreliable narrator and his questionable sanity. Next is psychological torment of self fulfilling guilt. Now, self fulfilling guilt suggests that his confession ultimately at the time. What did I tell you earlier? That just you need to remember the 4 points and the whole idea is with your hand. Just to remember which point you need to use when and which sentence, textual examples, for textual examples, when you need to give the textual examples and how to collect them and how to use them. These are the factors that you need to know, and then all's done. The psychological torment of self fulfilling guilt is reflected in this textual example that villains I shriek dissemble no more. I admit the deed. Here up the blanks. Here. It is the beating of his hideous heart. Psychological torment of his self-fulfilling guilt suggests that he is tormenting within. Naturally, his heart, the heartbeat, as it grows louder, he is hearing it, and he pretends that not to hear it, but it disturbs him more, and he thinks his ratiocination makes him believe that the police are also not oblivion of this. They are also listening to this, but they are keeping themselves silent to him because they want to catch hold of him. Naturally, he cannot bear it. and confesses. This confession forced by his own psychological torment. So this is the psychological torment of self-fulfilling guilt. The next is exploration of guilt and conscience. So exploration of guilt and conscience suggests through this textual example, the textual line. It was a slow, dull, quick sound, such a sound watch makes then enveloped in a cotton. That sentence that we have also dealt with earlier. So the twist, the gradual onset of the heart's beating suggests a mystery within the narrator's own mind. It is a heartbeat of the old man or the sound of his own conscience betraying him. Either it is the heartbeat of the old man or his own conscience that makes him feeling that no, the sound is coming from the floorboard. It is the heartbeat of the old man. So I am actually listening. Whether is he actually listening? That is the question. That makes the exploration of his guilt and conscience. So his conscience is actually torn apart. And this description of the heartbeat reflects the narrator's increasing anxiety. The anxiety leads him to confess finally because he is becoming mad and he cannot tolerate this. He cannot bear this madness within him. So this is very painful, and this pain actually suggests the idea. Now, after the psychological mystery, these points, which are significant, if you cannot understand the previous one, there is a small slide, small point of views. Psychological complexity is here, and serial unreliable narrator and his insanity, exposition of guilt and conscience, obsession versus rationalization, the psychological torment of self-fulfilling guilt. These are the points that you need to remember to understand psychological mystery of the text. Moving on to the next is the themes. These are the themes. So many themes I needed to deal with each one of them. But what you have to do, I should not say each point in detail because the PDF version I will be giving you on the description. So from there also you can get your possible ideas, how to write them, how to get the points, how to check the concepts and the lines. So these are the themes that rivals and doppelgangers, madness, guilt, time, the dead and the living, self, solitude and conscience, the Gothic style, and the power of memory. All of them are dealt here one by one. The first one is the rivals and doppelgangers. Now, the theme of rivalry is subtle yet powerful, as we all know. A doppelganger. What is a doppelganger? An apparition or double of a living person is implied in the psychological tension between the narrator and his fixation on the old man's eye. So here's how the rivals and concept of the doppelgangers function in the story. Rivals, old man as a rival. Internal rivalry. See that Bale, this external rivalry that has come from the vulture eye is a disturbing force. The internal rivalry comes from the narrator's mind within. His obsession with the eye and compulsion to kill, despite claiming love for the old man, suggests a profound inner conflict. So, this is the internal rivalry. Doppelgangers, the eye as a reflection of the narrator. So, the old man's eye works as a mirror and the narrator's soul, symbolizing his own guilt and fear. The way the eye acts as a doppelganger, a double that forces the narrator to confront aspects of himself he cannot tolerate or escape. The beating heart is an echo of the narrator's guilt. Yes, we all know by this time that the beating heart works as an echo of the narrator's guilt because this also works as a doppelganger, the double. So the eye and the heart beating are both, resounding as the doppelgangers in the story. As I told you again, let me remind you that the four key aspects that you need to remember. So in the story, Poe masterfully combines rivalry and doppelganger themes by blurring the line between external and internal worlds. So there is internal conflict, there is external conflict, and they are merging with each other. That is the significant point. The second theme that comes as madness. Madness is definitely central theme of the whole story. Previously, in the previous slides, we have already discussed about madness, how madness comes, and how the narrator becomes mad. We have already discussed that. But here, the points are the self-deception and denial of insanity. Continuously, the narrator wants to deny his insanity. Again, he is insane. He is becoming insane. That is also powerfully explored. Insistence on his sanity becomes ironic as he obsessively tries to justify his actions through his rational descriptions of his meticulous planning, which only highlights his delusion. Obsessive fixation on the eyes. The eye is a significant point, and the overwhelming paranoia, which also gives the sound from the sound, the old man's heartbeat, which he perceives as the growing louder and louder, and the beating heart ultimately drives him to confess. Breakdown of reason and rationality. So finally, his logical explanations for each action and his calm demeanor while disturbing gruesome acts become clear at the end. So this is the breakdown point of reason and rationality. The contrast between his logical tone and irrational motives suggests a complete breakdown of reason, highlighting the fine line between sanity and madness. So, in that way, he also goes to his madness. The theme of madness is significant here. So, it explores the madness theme as a force that distorts reality, consumes the mind, and leads to self destruction. The third theme is the guilt. So, guilt is an external theme that drives the narrative and ultimately leads to the narrator's downfall. And the key aspects are denial and justification. Second is beating heart as a symbol of guilt, compulsive confession. So, finally, the confession, psychological breakdown that we have understood here. And here, Poe suggests that guilt is an inescapable force that cannot be rationalized away or ignored. Because if you are guilty, your guilt will come out. Yes, most of the times it doesn't happen at all. But here, at least in Poe's story, it happens that the person is guilty and his guilt is coming out. Now, I'm going to show you later a very striking similarity between one text, another movie. This text is this one, the Telltale Heart, and the movie version is a different one. Let me come to that point. I'm not disclosing this right now. So, this is the theme of guilt. Next point is the time, theme of time, which is very again significant because time is a central thematic part, symbolizing the narrator's obsession, building tension, and ultimately exposing his guilt. So, obsessive attention to time, where because this obsession or meticulous approach to time reflects his obsessive nature. He describes how he spends an hour to place the whole head within opening. Remember that an hour. So he is meticulously maintaining or measuring the time, taking of the time, and each point is very significant to him. Therefore, obsessive attention to time is one point. The murder is planned down to the first finest detail, and each moment is stretched as if time is flowing under the weight of obsession. Second is symbolic use of the time leading to the act. Naturally, the date of the night. That means the when the murderer commits the murder. It reflects a larger theme of inevitability, if as if the time itself is urging him towards his violent act. So, for 7 nights, he carefully approaches the old man's room, building suspense and foreboding with each passing night. Time seems to push the narrator almost as if he's trapped in its grip. Time, therefore, becomes very significant. Thought is beating hard as the ticking clock. You can understand this. I don't need to. I don't think that I don't. I need to explain this line: the beating heart as the ticking clock. The last one is a time as an indicator of madness. Now, Poe uses his narrator's rapt sense of time to hint his instability. The narrator's focus on precise timing and counting becomes irrationally meticulous, suggesting a break from reality. So, this relentless ticking of time practically leads him to his madness. So the text becomes more than just a breakdown element. It is an oppressive force. Time is here working as an oppressive force. Now, the narrator towards the madness, it leads the narrator towards the madness and unraveling his carefully constructed facade of control. The next theme is the dead and the living. So, the dead and the living is a central of the narrator's psychological torment, fear of the old man's living eye. Now, you can understand. So, life in death. How? After killing the old man, so beating heart is here important. Life in death. So, he kills or he killed old man, but even after that, he is hearing the sound of his beating heart. That begins the how the dead man becomes living. Life is working in death. And the bloodline between life and death. So Poe creates a haunting ambiguity between what is dead and what is alive. The narrator's breakdown stems from his inability to separate the old man's physical death from his psychological presence. So psychologically he's thinking that the old man is present, but actually he commits the murder. So he knows in his head, in his conscience, that the old man is no more. But the beating of the heart in his conscience is hearing. So this becomes a very confusive idea. It goes the psychological element in the story. So how guilt and fear can make the dead man seem alive, or the haunting living in ways that cannot be silenced or hidden. These are clear from the theme of dead and the living. The next is self solitude and consciousness, were intricately woven together to explore the psychological breakdown of the narrator self. The narrator's intense focus on the own perceptions and actions reveals a distorted sense of self. So, this distorted sense of self is clear from the very beginning. He is trying to build a motivated idea about himself. And gradually, as if he's progressing towards the end of the story, as if he's building a plot, building a construction, building something that in his own way. So that becomes very psychological, intense, and practically, taking him down to the road of madness. So the self becomes significant here. Solitude. Solitude amplifies the narrator's paranoia and mental inability. Isolated from society and without anyone to challenge his increasingly erratic thoughts, he becomes fixated on the old man's eye. Now, naturally, this is a very interesting point because the lack of social context or companionship gives him a strange kind of feeling. The old is only thinking about the old man's heart, eye, etc. Why? Because he's castrated from the society. He is not doing anything to the society. Although the story doesn't show this much. So that one has no external perspectives to ground him, who emphasizes how solitude can breed madness when left unchecked, as the narrator's obsessive inner world leads him down a dark path. Now, the final part is the consciousness. The text shows, especially regarding the narrator's self awareness and guilt. Though he attempts to rationalize his actions, his consciousness betrays him as is haunted by the imagined beating of the heart of the old man to convince himself as the reader of sanity. See here, the sound symbolizes his guilty conscience. See, this is the part of consciousness. Now, finally, that the isolation and overactive consciousness can distort one's sense of self, it is proved from the text. Now, moving on to the next theme is the Gothic style. There are so many setting and atmosphere, madness and psychological horror, supernatural elements, time of death and guilt, isolation, and the grotesque. These points are the points of Gothic style. So I don't think that I need to explain each one of them. Just remember the points. You can easily understand from the points. And even if it is not, just go to the points again. So, from the Telltale Heart, we can understand that it is the unique Gothic atmosphere has been creating here, transforming it into a haunting exploration of guilt, madness, and the darkest corners of human psyche. The last part, however, on this part of theme, the power of memory. And here we need to understand that it becomes an inescapable force that drives him to madness. Him means the narrator, and eventually confesses to his confession. So the memory as a source of guilt and the heartbeat as a manifestation of memory as a self-punishment. These are the points. And it is not just a passive recall of the past, but an active haunting force that has psychological and moral weight. These are the parts of the films that we have already here completed. Now, we need to understand another concept, that is the concept of alter ego. What is an alter ego? The concept of alter ego is explored through the relationship between the narrator and the old man he lives with. An alter ego represents an alternative personality or a hidden aspect of the self, often harboring desires or emotions the primary personality cannot openly express or accept. Poe uses this literary device to portray the narrator's complex psyche, suggesting that the old man may represent the darker aspects of the narrator's own identity. So, in that way, the old man walks as an alter ego of the narrator. Now, here is the projection of inner fears and obsessions. These are the lines: vulture's eye, blood run cold. He had the eye of a vulture, a pale blue eye, etc. The projection of inner fears and obsessions sometimes clears out that the concept of alter ego of the narrator as the darker side of the personality. So here, this projection implies that the old man is not just a separate character, but a reflection of the narrator's own psyche, creating an alter ego relationship where the old man embodies the narrator's inner turmoil. Second is the denial of guilt through displacement. Now, object there was none, passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For this cold, I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was his eye. So the narrator insists loves the old man and no personal grievance against him he had, focusing solely on the I as his motivation for murder. So this is the denial of guilt through displacement, the old man as an external source of his anxiety rather than acknowledging his own moral failing. Third one is the unraveling of sanity through alter ego conflict. It is the beating of his hideous heart. So throughout the story, the narrator's insanity is called into question, especially as he becomes increasingly haunted by the sound of the old man's heart or heartbeat after committing the murder. So, this imagined sound of the heart may represent the narrator's own guilt and suppressed conscience, which he tries to externalize to the dead old man. This imagined heartbeat signifies basically the narrator's inability to separate from his own guilt and conscience, showing how the old man, as his alter ego, continues to haunt him even after death. Now, in the conclusion part, we can say that the old man serves as more than just a victim, he is the narrator's alter ego, embodying his darkest obsessions and unacknowledged guilt. So, using this point, you can actually create this version of alter ego that the old man is actually the alter ego of the narrator, And these points are suggestive ones. And I tried my best to collect the textual examples for use. In each point, there are textual examples which you can use for your answer. On the next slide, we have here the symbols and meaning and understanding of the symbols. And the symbols in the text in the short story Telltale Heart are basically three: heart, eye, architecture. The first one, we are going to deal with symbol of heart. Now, here, symbol of guilt and conscience. So, symbol of heart is the symbol of guilt and conscience. Now, in the story, the narrator's guilt are expressed throughout through the heart, the symbolical significance of the heart. So, it is increasing in beating serves as a reminder of his crime, and it is interesting intensity mirrors his rise in guilt and paranoia. Although he tries to justify the murder by insisting in sanity and calmness, the heartbeat he hears is a relentless reminder of his crime that we have already encountered. So this is the textual example. Suppose description of heartbeat as a getting louder and louder, reflecting the narrator's uncontrollable guilt. Not only that, the beating heart as a projection of madness, and we have already understood this point. So this symbol of heart also is the projection of madness. Symbol of heart means that it projects his madness. Moreover, looking onto the next point of the symbolic heart here, the heart as a literal and metaphorical death symbol. In a more literal sense, that heart is associated with the act of murder itself. The narrator kills the old man by suffocating him and then dismembers his body, attempting to eliminate any trace of his crime. However, the heart, an organ, sustains life, ironically becomes a source of torment after the murder. And the example is this: I made the dead, tear up the planks, here, etc. In this confession, the narrator attributes his guilt to the hideous heart, shifting the blame to the heart's sound rather than his own actions. This line marks his final loss of the control as he succumbs to the pressure of his guilt, personifying the heart as though it actively accusing him. Poe's use of the heart to enhance psychological tension. So Poe uses the psychological tension to create this symbol of heart because it gives a tension to the readers, to also the character who are included into the story. So basically, Telltale Heart symbolizes much more than the just a literal heartbeat of a man. It serves as a powerful emblem of guilt, madness, and conscience. So the heartbeat, robust exposition of the guilt and madness. Next symbol is the eye, symbol of eye. And in the symbol of eye, it is an object of obsession and madness. So culture eye, a pale blue eyes with a film over it. And the textual example is this. So the narrator's obsession becomes a driving force. I is here not because the old man has wronged him, but simply because the sight of the eye disturbs him. Next point is the eye as a motive for violence and control. Here, the narrator believes that by destroying the eye, he can get rid of himself his feelings of discomfort and paranoia. This belief demonstrates the lengths he is willing to go into the order to gain control over his mental state and environment. However, it becomes ironical. It just turns over into something else. Textual example is here, and the final explanation that the narrator's nightly visits to observe the old man's eye underscores his attempt to exert control over it. However, this attempt ultimately reveals his lack of control over his own thoughts and emotions. The vulture eye basically torments the narrator. More points of the symbol of eye is this: the eye as a symbol of the unseen truth, and the eye is also foreshadowing a role in the climax. The eye's function in the plot foreshadows the climax and contributes to the theme of inevitable guilt. His obsession goes to the point where he justifies murder to rid himself of this eye. It was impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once concept it haunted day and night. Now, after killing the old man, he doesn't get rid of the eye because it is not the eye. Right now, he is tormented by the heartbeat, the sound of the heart. So, this becomes again very interesting that the narrator wants to get rid of something else and something else is placed against it. So, in the short story, the eye is more than a physical feature. It's a psychological symbol that illustrates the narrator's madness, guilt, and fear of being truly known. The eye's haunting presence not only propels the narrative, but also reflects the narrator's inescapable inner turmoil, showing Poe's mastery in using symbolism to heighten horror and explore the depths of the human psyche. The last symbol that we have to understand is the symbol of architecture. So, the symbol of architecture is very unique. And architecture plays a subtle yet powerful role, symbolizing the narrator's disturbed mind and the way he tries to hide his guilt. The first one is the house as a reflection of the mind. And why? Because house is specifically an old man's bedroom where much of the action unfolds. This enclosed shadowy space symbolizes the narrator's own mind, filled with darkness, secrets, and eventually guilt. Poe does not describe the house in detail. But the claustrophobic and confined atmosphere suggests the narrator's inner turmoil. House is an enclosed world mirroring the narrator's enclosed obsessive thoughts. And textual example is this, that it took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening up so that I could see him as a lay up on his bed. He would, madman, have been so wise as this. This passage reflects the narrator's meticulousness and symbolically his desire to control his environment. His actions suggest that he wished to attempt to maintain control over his mind. The next point is the floorboards as a symbol of concealment of guilt. The floorboards that we all know, the textual example also suggests that through this floorboard, now why I am not describing each line step by step or each line that I have written here or given here, because these are not necessary. You can really understand right now what is the symbol of the architecture, what is the symbol of the eye, etc. If you need more elaborate discussion, I will give you the sources also, and I am giving this PDF version to the description section, so you can easily download them, easily can print them, easily you can point out those ideas, those points. So it is not necessary, just I'm telling you the significant points. The floorboards as a symbol of concealment and guilt. And the next part, that here in this symbol of architecture, is the heartbeat beneath the floorboards. Architecture as a psychological confinement. This is significant because here in this sound, when the sound becomes louder, grows louder, here the narrator suggests that the architectural pattern of the floorboards is giving him the as a psychological confinement. He is confining within himself. The heartbeat beneath the floorboard is therefore significant from the structural point of view, from the architectural point of view. And thus, the architecture serves as a powerful symbol of the narrator's disturbed mental state. The house of floorboards and the confined room create a claustrophobic atmosphere that mirrors the narrator's trapped psyche, while the concealed body and the ever present heartbeat illustrate futility of attempting to bury guilt. Leaving symbols, now we come to the part of allusions. The vulture eye, the beating heart, supernatural or devil, madness and rationality, Gothic and romantic themes. So these are the just textual examples that I have collected for you. And these textual examples are illustrated for each allusion, like the vulture eye, there is that textual example and explanation. And the beating of the heart, there is that textual example and explanation. Just get this done. You can easily understand all of the allusions together. So just I'm giving you for one for you. That supernatural or devil. Let us speak this one. It was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. By attributing the reason for this crime to evil eye, the narrator shifts blame onto an external superstitious force, distancing himself from his own madness and guilt. So it is not the guilt, it is about allusions, it is about the supernatural or devil. So thus these allusions are given here. Now to the next part, that what does the title indicate? It will indicate the revelation of guilt, the voice of conscience, uncontrollable force leading to confession, betrayal of hidden truth. So this revelation of guilt through this textual example, voice of conscience, through this textual example, uncontrollable force leading to confession, this textual example, betrayal of hidden truth, through this textual example. So textual examples are collected only to suggest what does the title indicate. So you can get easily the title of the text. What is the significance of the title? And we can also get the textual examples from here. Now, moving on again to the literary devices of the telltale heart. There are so many literary devices, symbols, imagery, personification, irony, simile, metaphor. These are not very important. Even I have given you, I have collected for you these. There are the textual examples which suggest symbols, imagery, personification, irony, simile, metaphor, etc. This slide is significant for you only to understand the literary devices, what are in the text. Now, again, moving on to the next, the remarkable similarity between, as I was telling you, that there is indeed a remarkable similarity between the Telltale Heart and the movie The Shutter Island. Yes, this is significant and this is very interesting. Here, in the next slide, I am giving you the points that Edgar Allan Poe's Telltale Heart and Shutter Island, published in 2010 by Martin Scorsese's movie. There are two points that I have suggested here: guilt as a driving force in the Telltale Heart and in the Shutter Island, and descent into madness in the Telltale Heart and in the Shutter Island. So, guilt and descent into madness both are very overwhelmingly present in both these two texts. So, when you need to write down one answer, any answer, you can give these examples for your support. Now, finally, come to the part of the questions of each 5 and 10 marks. These are the questions, and don't worry about this because I have marked all of these questions into yellow color so that you can understand the point. Guilt and conscience, reliable, or reliability of the narrator, evil eye, theme of madness, elements of Gothic literature, motive of the heart, limitations of perception and reality, theme of time and memory. And even after that, if you want to get more, you can get through the whole segment of the video and you can get through the themes and explanations where you have more questions likely. So these are the questions basically sketched for you. And if you can do this, you can have all the answers together. And finally, this is the critical materials for further study. There are the sources also. So these sources that I have collected for you, there are 8 sources, and specifically I have mentioned this one, number 4. It is about the text, so you can get the text from here, and these two are the YouTube videos, whereas this one, this Edgar Allan Poe the Telltale Heart YouTube, now this video link, if you click on the link, you can directly get to the video or directly come to the point of YouTube video, the link I have given here. And this is another Telltale Heart, so both are interesting factors. One very nicely projected on the screen. Both are brilliant, both are extraordinary. So these are the sources, these are the critical materials. If you want more, you can go through this. You can really have interesting ideas about this very complex but critical short story. And I know that I'm taking too much time of your busy schedule. Yes, I am not going to take any more. So these are the critical materials that you need to be sure about. And thank you very much for watching this video. This is not just the end, this is just the beginning of the text. If you try to analyze more, this will be more interesting. Thank you very much for watching this video till the end. Thank you. Stay healthy, stay blessed.